Okay, I think we can get started whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I think it's time for us to get started. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, but I particularly want to thank Emily Largent from the University of Pennsylvania and the rest of the ORCOR Steering Committee for helping to organize this webinar with really great support from Hannah Rosenstrater from NACC. We have three wonderful speakers, Josh Grill, Rachel Noshany, and Jessica Langbaum. Sorry, Jessica, murdering your name, who are really going to give you an overview of different approaches for creating and supporting registries. This is a topic that's been much discussed among the ORCORs. It seems to be a source of stress and angst, particularly for groups that are going in for the renewals for this round of applications. But I just want to read to start us off with what's in the RFA, because it's pretty broad. It says that ORCORs will work with the clinical core to develop and maintain a local registry or database of potential study volunteers. Utilize the registry to facilitate rapid enrollment in clinical studies, evaluate the effectiveness of the registry, and describe how adjustments will be made, particularly with respect to inclusion of diverse populations and at-risk groups, as well as to meet the local research needs. I think what you're going to see this morning, that there are very many ways to do this, and one of the wonderful and unique aspects of our network of Alzheimer's centers is that we have a fair amount of local autonomy. In other words, centers can design the registries that meet the need of their particular center. So there are lots and lots of ways that this can be done. And we're hoping today that, you'll come out of this webinar feeling a little bit more secure in how to approach this, this particular aspect of the renewal application. So without further ado, I am going to stop talking and let Josh, are you going first?
I believe I am.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dorothy. Let me bring up my slides very quickly while I also thank the other members of the steering committee and organizers for inviting me to be a part of this session. I agree it's important. I'm hoping you're getting the right view and not the presenter mode view.
Looks good.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I'm Josh Grill. I'm a member of the UC Irvine Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. A lot of my own work has been in the area of recruitment science, and in particular, thinking about how to best utilize registries. These are my disclosures. None are really relevant to today's talk, but I'll leave them there for a second. The main points I want to make in my brief, hopefully 10-minute talk is that recruitment efforts should really leverage any and all registries available to the investigator, because recruitment is a very consistent challenge to accelerating discoveries in AD and ADRD research. But I'll spend most of my time talking about the value of local registries and some of our experiences building one here at UC Irvine. I think that they present opportunities, as Dorothy outlined, to be strategic, to support recruitment, and I make clear to many studies, but also that if you build these carefully, you can use them to get rapid feedbacks on topics that are important to your center and answer novel research questions. So I think that all investigators who have recruited to prospective studies probably appreciate the challenges that can come with that. And so when I'm consulting investigators, in particular junior investigators, about how to recruit to their clinical trials or their observational studies, I always tell them to leave no stone unturned. Think about all the registries that are available, national, regional, as well as local, and make requests to those registries to try to recruit to your study. This is important because it brings new opportunities that could accelerate your study, but hopefully also diversify your study and meet your scientific goals more quickly. One registry that is national that I'm a part of and very proud of, but I won't have time to talk about today, is the CARE registry, the collaborative approach for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders for research and education. CARE was funded by an NIA R24 under the leadership of Dr. Van Ta Park at UCSF, and has recruited 10,000 Asian Americans into a recruitment registry. I think this is really an incredible achievement by Dr. Park and her team, which includes a wide variety of community-based organizations as partners to achieving these goals. And Asian Americans are among many groups that are historically underrepresented in our research. So as you're thinking about registries that could support your study, you should also think about whether there are registries that can help you diversify your study and make sure that your study is as inclusive as possible. As I said, I'm going to try to focus my time on a local registry that we built here at UC Irvine called the Consent to Contact Registry, or C2C. We are near the ocean, and I was doing a little bit of a play on words there. But this is what we call a local registry that we built. This is a slide we use in community audiences to kind of explain what the registry is. I do often refer to it as a dating service where we're putting people together, or matchmaking, if you will, members of our community who are interested in participating in research and investigators who are conducting studies that need them, that want to make contributions and need to recruit participants. We make this free. That is, that it's free for people to enroll, and it's free for investigators to use as a resource. We rely on the IRB to vet the studies that recruit from this registry, but we also engage with investigators ourselves, requiring their IRB approval notice to use it as a resource. Our registry is relatively small compared to some of the very impressive things you'll hear about today. Historically, we've enrolled more than 8,500 people in this local registry, with just under 5,000 doing what we call full enrollment, that is providing a fairly broad amount of data for us to use in conducting the registry, and again, even querying the registry to try to understand novel research questions. We built this in 2015 and launched it in 2016. There's a paper that hopefully I'll have cited later on in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease in 2018 that describes our efforts to build this registry. We did it with a relatively small philanthropic gift to stand it up. It runs on a REDCap data infrastructure, and the support from the philanthropic gift really went to the team members involved in helping us build this and get it running. Our goal is to get 10,000 people in this as quickly as possible. People, when they enroll, I'll show you some of the data that they give. We also ask them to renew annually, mostly with an email reminder, and about half of them do that on a consistent basis. You can see that we're mostly female in our registrants, with modest diversity, 70% who are not non-Hispanic white. One of the key questions we ask when people enroll in our registry is their willingness to be contacted about studies that require specific research procedures. And you can see those listed here, as well as the proportion of people in our registry who are agreeable to contact about those types of things. Why do I think this is key? When we receive requests from investigators to recruit from our registry, we actually work with them to design a query that includes a mandated inclusion of these specific variables. That is, if a study involves MRI, we will only send people to that study who have agreed to contact about studies that include MRIs. And so we can use this to try to increase the efficiency of this as a recruitment source. We also carefully track where people come from in our registry as far as recruiting into the registry. You can see that there's a fairly broad collection of sources of participants into our registry, with email really standing out as so far the single highest source. This comes from one effort that we undertook partnering with our healthcare system to email people through MyChart and see if they were interested in participation in the registry. And we had about a 1% response rate to that campaign. But that campaign really didn't produce the kind of diversity that we were hoping for in our registry. So we have turned our attention to other types of efforts. And we're really proud to have partnered with Amy Kind and the data core leader at our ADRC, Dan Gillen, to write an NIH grant to get support for trying to recruit from Orange County's diverse neighborhoods in a stratified way, whereby we're actually oversampling some of our most diverse and disadvantaged neighborhoods in Orange County based on the Area Deprivation Index that Dr. Kind has, really led the world in thinking about, and a data democratization effort to make this available as a tool for researchers nationwide. So you can see a heat map based on the ADI on the right for people who are already in the C2C. The salmon bars reflect their distribution across ADI deciles, and compare it to the greater Orange County community. So we actually did a decent job of recruiting people into the registry who were reflective of that greater local demography. But now our efforts are placed squarely on trying to increase representation of the most diverse neighborhoods, with the long-term goal of diversifying our ADRC research and all of the research that recruits from our registry. Briefly, you can see that we have been heavily using this tool. Even though we've not recruited this many people to the registry, we've referred nearly 10,000 people to study. So obviously we're sending people to more than one study. We're currently analyzing this data at more depth to look at the burden of the study we refer to and the efficiency of our approach. But you can see that just under 1/3 of people we have referred to studies at UCI, and that now includes more than 60 studies by nearly as many investigators. 1/3 of those folks have actually enrolled in those studies. One other thing I'll highlight is that we have a relatively low screen failure rate. Again, I think both of these points are to emphasize our approach in the registry, which includes collecting data to try to make sure that we're not sending people to studies that they're ineligible for, based on medical history, medications, and the like, but also asking about their willingness to participate and trying to match them with studies they're likely to say yes to. We can use this to get rapid feedback. I don't have time to go into this at length, but around the decision that the FDA made to grant accelerated approval to aducanumab, we quickly put together a survey, sent it to people prior to the FDA decision, and then sent it again after the FDA decision, and had a very novel within subjects approach to assessing people's attitudes towards clinical trials around that decision. The paper is cited at the bottom here. And we've used this as an approach in other areas, not with the rapid approach, but simply as a unique population to try to answer research questions. And again, in the interest of time, I really can't go through all of these papers, but we really are proud of some of the things that we've been able to do just in our registry. For example, we did one study where, to be eligible for the study, you had to have said no to that research lumbar puncture requirement, and we looked at whether education could change people's minds about participating in research that required lumbar puncture, and whether the framing of that education, going back to some of the really cool psychological research by people like Kahneman and Tversky, whether the framing of that education impacted its efficiency. That's the Whitbrock et al. Frontiers in Medicine paper from 2020. But all of these are, I think, I hope, interesting studies that could be instructive to things you're doing in your registry or the ways that you're recruiting to your studies. So I've tried to be efficient, but my main points were that if you're thinking about recruiting to a study, registries could be an incredible tool to accelerate your progress. That if you're running an ADRC ORE core and you're contemplating that requirement in the RFA, building a local registry could be a valuable tool for your ADRC, and it might be something you could do with relatively limited resources to really think about using as a catchment for your outreach and recruitment efforts, to support your clinical core, and to do other studies that will further the mission of your center. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to Dorothy and look forward to the Q&A.
Thanks, Josh. That was great. I was furiously scribbling. So I think you've really demonstrated the value of a local registry. Our next speaker is Rachel Nasheni. So Rachel, you're up next.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me and see my slides?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much to Emily and Dorothy, the steering committee, and all the organizers for the invitation to speak. Let me minimize everyone. I'm going to talk about our experience using the Brain Health Registry for recruitment, engagement, and assessment for Alzheimer's disease clinical research. And I'm going to begin with an overview of the BHR and then really try to focus on some key questions that are likely to be of interest to the OR core. So BHR, or Brain Health Registry, is an internet-based registry with over 100,000 participants enrolled since 2014. Recruitment is mainly from the general public, and most participate remotely only without any kind of in-clinic footprint. So the approach is remote, digital recruitment, engagement, assessment, and longitudinal monitoring. And I think this approach has many advantages, such as scalability, efficiency, decreased burden, and accessibility to hard-to-reach populations. But there are also a number of challenges, such as validity, data integrity, adoption of the technology, and many different selection biases. So Brain Health Registry is meant to be a resource for the AD and aging community outside of our research group, and in fact, even outside of the AD field. And I'm not going to go through this all in detail today because I don't have time, but I just wanted to point out some of the ways in which BHR facilitates research. So we have this large longitudinal cohort with extensive cognitive health and behavioral data that could be used to test all different hypotheses related to health, cognition, and recruitment science, and also as a test bed to develop and validate remote digital methods. We, of course, refer BHR participants to other studies, and I will focus on that a little bit today. Co-enrollment is where participants in an in-clinic cohort are invited to enroll in BHR with data linkage. We've done that in another of studies. Recently, we've had a lot of requests for this kind of study building functionality where different studies want to have an online component of their studies, and we can help them do that with customizable protocols and communications and study management tools. And then we also share de-identified data from the Brain Health Registry. So in advance of this meeting, Emily provided some key questions that are likely to be of interest to this group, and I'm going to focus on these for the remainder of my talk, starting with who does the registry target? So this is the demographic and cognitive profile of BHR participants. So again, we have over 100,000 enrolled, and although a lot of our focus is on older adults, and you can see that we have a large representation of individuals in their 50s and 60s, this registry is open to anyone age 18 and over. And for that cohort of older adults, age 55 plus, here is their demographic breakdown. So about almost 16 years of education, about 73% female. You can see the breakdown by race and ethnicity, about 49% with a subjective memory concern, 5.5% with MCI, 2.5% with self-report dementia or AD, and about 45% come for longitudinal follow-up. And we have a number of initiatives to enrich for diverse populations and for those with cognitive impairment. We know we have a selection bias for those who are cognitively unimpaired. This is just a heat map showing the distribution, the geographic location. So we have good representation across the US and actually globally as well, but you can see these areas where we have a lot of participants that largely reflects the focus of a lot of our recruitment efforts. So do we collect any samples or measures, and if so, how? So in terms of assessments, these are all collected at 6-month intervals. We collect cognitive and health data using self-report questionnaires across many different domains shown here. We also administer digital unsupervised cognitive tests of memory, learning, attention, and others. And we've spent a lot of time over the last few years looking at the results of these cognitive tests and questionnaires for evidence of feasibility and validity. And we've seen a strong relationship to in-clinic measures, neuropsych tests, diagnosis, and amyloid. I don't have time to go into those results in detail. We also have an infrastructure for collecting biomarkers and genetics. So this started with the infrastructure for including genetic data. So we have remote saliva collection for ApoE and over 1,700 participants with another 2,200 planned. And then starting in 2019, we adapted this infrastructure for remote blood collection for plasma biomarkers. And we've collected data from a pilot study, also more recently from 500 Black and Latinx older adults. And other studies are also now using this infrastructure for remote blood collection. And we also collect study partner data using what we call the Caregiver and Study Partner Portal. So all BHR participants are asked to identify a study partner who can then enroll, consent online, and play the informant role with data linked to the participant. We collect a lot of subjective measures, and we have about 11,000 dyads enrolled, again, with evidence for feasibility and validity of the study partner information. We just developed what we call study partner first capability. So this is the ability for the study partner to be the first or only point of contact for the registry. And we think this may help us to enrich for older adults with cognitive impairment who may not themselves have the motivation or the capability to interact directly with the registry. So how is data tracked? Let me focus on referrals here for a moment. So we've made a lot of referrals to different studies with about 25,000 people enrolled. The way this works is that all participants can opt in to learning about future research opportunities when they enroll. The BHR staff and the collaborator then agree on inclusion-exclusion criteria, and we query the database to identify eligible participants. The eligible participants get automated emails with a study description, and then depending on the study, the participant contacts the study staff or the study staff contacts the participant. And we really track this very carefully, how many are responded, interested, claimed by the study, enrolled, how many withdrew. And that's what you're seeing, a summary of that on the right. This just shows many different of our referral programs and the number of people who were referred and how many enrolled. And you can see there's really a lot of variability here. It depends on the study. We also track other things in BHR, such as recruitment sources, completion of study tasks. We monitor all participant communications and respond, sometimes using like a Zendesk automated response system. And we also collect some metadata. So how do we recruit and engage, especially underrepresented groups? I'll focus on two of our initiatives to increase diversity here. The approach we're taking is using community engaged research strategies and adapting them to a digital environment with the goal to increase participation of historically underincluded groups, but more broadly to develop evidence-based best practices for recruitment and engagement that can be used by other groups, other studies. All of our approaches are culturally informed in close partnership with community boards, and they've really taken a multifaceted approach, including advertising, different participant communications, inclusive design, different types of incentives, and an ambassador program. And here I'm just showing our group of investigators doing this work together. And I wanted to give two examples of these recruitment efforts. The first is the California Latino Brain Health Registry, or CalBHR, had the overall goal to recruit 5,000 older adult Latinx individuals in California to join the BHR. Here's some of our recruitment materials, both in English and Spanish. And so as a result of these efforts, we enrolled over 7,300 individuals. 77% of them, or over 5,600, identify as Latinx. And the Latinx representation in BHR went from 6% to 12%, so doubled. You can see the geographic distribution of these participants. This also included a Spanish language recruitment component, as well as a Spanish language translation of the website. And this enrolled over 1,000 individuals, 93% of whom identified as Latinx. And then we also have our CEDAR, or Community Engaged Digital Alzheimer's Research Study. This started with a pilot study where the goal was to improve the engagement and research participation of Black BHR participants. So people already enrolled in BHR, and you can see some of the engagement materials here. So now the messaging is around, we want you back. There's an email invitation to join. And this effort enrolled 420 individuals. You can see their demographic breakdown here. We also recently evaluated the effectiveness of our so-called engagement intervention. So what I'm showing you here are engagement levels of different engagement metrics. So for each plot, so for example, for those who enrolled in referrals in different studies, those who completed their time point in the Brain Health Registry, those who completed cognitive tests. So this is a difference in difference analysis of engagement levels before and after the intervention for those who enrolled in CEDAR in blue and those who were not enrolled in CEDAR in orange. And you can see that for most outcomes, the CEDAR participants started out with higher engagement levels for sure compared to those who are not enrolled. And importantly, the engagement levels increased after the intervention for those enrolled. This supports the effectiveness of this sort of intensive, multifaceted engagement approach. And in the future, we'll evaluate these methods to improve engagement in those who start out with low levels of engagement. So finally, any tips or lessons learned along the way? So I've listed a few here. So recruitment, getting people in the door, is easier than keeping them engaged in the study. And recruitment itself is still hard, getting people in. Incentives are important, but I think we can think of incentives really broadly. They could be financial. We have evidence that these work, but there are other types of incentives, always starting with gratitude, giving people an opportunity to acknowledge that they're participating in research for different reasons, and results disclosure. People who like doing things online really like doing things online. So we've seen this in our referral programs. If we ask people in the Brain Health Registry to join a different online study, like testing a mobile app, we get a high enrollment rate, but there's a real challenge moving people from a registry into in-clinic studies. It's just a different ask, especially for clinical trials. Diversity decreases at every step of the recruitment funnel. So you can start with a diverse group, but every time there's an additional ask, we lose that diversity. And I would say the same thing is true for our selection bias for those who are cognitively unimpaired. I think a real need is evidence-based methods to recruit and engage cognitively impaired older adults, including some of the study partner approaches that we're using. It's very challenging to balance high scalability with providing enough engagement and support. So what we're trying to do now is evaluate hybrid approaches where a lot of the communications with participants are automated, but we also have research navigators who can come in and help at key points in the process. And this is especially important for diverse populations. Of course, more complicated tasks require more support. We get a lot of requests for support when we enroll people in remote blood studies or ask them to download an app. We support many different studies, and investigators need support too for how to set up their study. They need guidance. And unfortunately, a lot of these support components don't scale up like other aspects of a registry. So just to close, I think there are many applications of registries for AD research and beyond research. They can facilitate AD research and trials in many different ways. They can also be used, remote digital assessment approaches can be used in other ways to identify suitable candidates to receive new therapeutics and identify older adults at risk in all different settings. And remaining challenges are recruitment, diversity, engagement, accessibility, retention, providing enough support, and integration into existing studies. Thank you.
Rachel, thank you. That was fascinating. And I think we could do a series of webinars on your lessons learned list. I really appreciate your willingness to share your insights about that, because this is a huge registry that you've managed to not only to create, but to make it useful and responsive to your participants. So thank you. Our next speaker is Jessica Langbaum, and we're interested in hearing what she's been doing at Banner, and then we'll have time after that for lots and lots of questions and interaction. So Jessica, thank you for participating in this webinar, and we'll let you start.
All right, thank you. And hopefully I got myself off of mute okay. I'm really excited about this, and I think that there's just so much that all of the ORE cores are going to be able to learn from one another over the next few years. So I hope that Dorothy and Emily, that this really is the beginning of this effort. So I'm going to share some information, hopefully, about, about really the Alzheimer's Prevention Registry and its programs. And this started actually back in 2000, well, it launched in 2012, building off of our statewide registry called the Arizona Alzheimer's Research Registry, which was a paper-based registry that, you know, consented people. We did telephone assessments and really it was a very labor-intensive effort. And as we were starting to think about the Alzheimer's Prevention Initiative trials and how were we going to reach all of these cognitively unimpaired individuals who might be at risk for developing Alzheimer's disease and connecting them to clinical trials, our advisor said, well, you know, build a registry and oh my gosh, it's just going to be so easy and you'll fill it up, no problem, and go for it. So we created this program that we thought, gosh, we're just going to do this. We thought we would open it up to anyone age 18 and older, modeling off of the very successful Army of Women registry at the time, which was connecting people to breast cancer related research studies. I created a website, endallsnow.org, and we wanted to collect some basic demographic information at sign up so that it was a lower threshold of commitment and entry, and then engage with them over time and send them study opportunities when they were available. Again, when we created this, it was almost like a waiting list, a mailing list, because we didn't have studies to connect them to over time at the moment. We didn't have that first prevention trial. We were just collecting information from people so that when we did have that study, we could email them and fill that study quickly. Sorry. Okay, so this is what our first website, and I just wanted to, I'm taking a little bit of a different approach than Josh and Rachel, since I think we all have a lot of the same information, but I thought I'd also just say, like, we thought we knew what we were doing, and we created this website, and it was like this inspirational message, and then people had to scroll all the way down and fill out all these forms, and people thought we were like soliciting them for money, right? Like, what are you asking me to do? And actually, very interestingly, this had them create a username and an account. And I can't tell you how many people back in 2012 would email us and say, well, why do you need my email username and password, right? Like, it was just confusing. It was a different time, right? About logins and things like that. And this was almost likened to asking somebody to marry them on the first date. We were collecting a lot of information. They didn't know who we were. We weren't a trusted source. So we took a step back, we reinvented the wheel, and we said, okay, well, we're gonna show that there's power in numbers, and we're gonna tell them, we're gonna give some inspirational message and tell them why they should join. And we're going to say, just take the first step, give us your email address, and then after you click join us today, they would be presented with some additional demographic information. But again, the call to action, while simplified of just providing an email address, again, what are we asking them to do? This was still unclear to folks. So we started some A/B testing with different versions of the website. And we said, okay, well, we have this like inspirational message on the left, our control, but sometimes people randomly show this other message of join us to receive email updates about Alzheimer's prevention research and opportunities. And this small change was a drastic improvement. We were much more clear about what we were asking of people. And so we continued this process with further A/B testing. People wanted to know who was behind the organization. We had a really great advisory board. We showed their institutional logos. We got credibility because people didn't necessarily know who Banner Health was outside of the Western United States, and moved on. And again, then we really said, okay, we're going to make it a really clear 1, 2, 3. You're going to sign up, you're going to receive emails, and then you can participate in what you approved. And this change really helped us in driving enrollment. And then lastly, we said, okay, it's getting really hard to just say, give us your email address. So we started to ask, how much more information can we collect at the very first step? Can we get their first name, last name, zip and postal code? And the reason for this was actually at the time, a lot of older adults shared an email address. There was one email address for the household. And I mean, I can speak for my parents, right? We often say like they have one email address and they share, but that became really confusing when you were trying to match people to studies, whose email, when you have just an email address on somebody, who are you inviting? So this actually, we implemented this so it could help with data cleanliness. And actually, we didn't see any differences in drop off between asking for just an email address versus some other demographic information. And that's really where we ended up with and where we're at right now, although this is going to change. This is in the process of changing. So right now you still see our landing page here. It's the clear 1, 2, 3 sign up, some basic demographic information. And then after they click sign up now, they're asked for some other demographic information. And I just put some stats here on the far right. So like other registries, we suffer from being predominantly women who join. We're told that they are the health information gatherers for the house. About almost 80% are non-Hispanic whites. Importantly for us, we are the Alzheimer's Prevention Registry. We do try to promote a lot of studies for cognitively healthy individuals, and about, most, nearly all of our participants at least self-report being cognitively healthy at least the time of sign up. They don't always update their information with us during the course. Most have a family history. And our way of engaging with them, in addition to connecting them with studies, is through email newsletters. And we spend a lot of time on curating and creating engaging email content and allowing people to manage their subscriptions. At first, we used to write the newsletters. We had a wonderful scientific writer. And it was just too detailed. It was like meant for scientists. And so we really had to step back, and we hired a writer who does a lot of lay-friendly content for us based on scientific advances in the literature. So we'll often take a newsworthy study and we highlight it. We highlight a different advancement or finding or something that's in the news each month, but really geared for a lay-friendly audience. We send a lot of emails out about here's a new study opportunity. Here's how to take the next step if you're interested. We're running out of space in the week to send out, days in the week and month to send out emails about study opportunities. So next up is text messages saying like log into your dashboard and see all the study opportunities that you've been matched to, rather in addition to trying to do individual e-blasts about study opportunities. This is slightly outdated, but well over 100. We've worked with well over 100 studies nationwide. Probably many of your own studies. We are really that matchmaking service that we view for not just studies at Banner Alzheimer's Institute or the Arizona ADRC, but across the country. And we've spent a lot of time over the past few years, trying to improve our infrastructure. And interestingly, we're going back to that login feature that we shied away from over time, because it's going to help us, we think, with data cleanliness and people being able to track their study opportunities that they've been connected to. And then where I'm going to next up is GMatch. So we did, as we were developing the generation program trials back in 2013 and 14, we needed a way to efficiently genotype individuals and then invite them to study opportunities. So we developed GeneMatch. It's a way that allows us to collect DNA from individuals remotely and then invite them to study opportunities in part based on their APOE genotype. GMatch is not a free direct-to-consumer genetic testing company. GMatch itself does not return results to individuals, but this enrolling study may return the results that were collected by GMatch. GMatch uses a CAP/CLIA accredited lab. We use buccal swabs. So we mail the cheek swab. People sign up online. We mail them a cheek swab kit in the mail. They swab and then return it to the lab. So where we're at right now with GMatch, which is a program of the Alzheimer's Prevention Registry, well over 110,000 people have enrolled. I think we have DNA now on about 75,000 individuals. So not everybody who signs up ends up returning their cheek swab kit to us, which is understandable. It might sit on their kitchen counter, or they say, you know what, I don't want to join something that's not going to immediately return my results to me. So again, predominantly female, mean age around 70. Interestingly, I find this, we collect DNA on people, but still 13% prefer not to provide their race or ethnicity on them. So they're providing their DNA, but they don't want to tell us their race or ethnicity. To date, GMatch is also, it helps with we help studies across the country with their recruitment needs, particularly if they need to enrich for a particular APOE genotype. And we do expect, we invested a lot in infrastructure for this program. So we expect that this is going to serve as the blueprint for our blood-based biomarker programs, where we collect blood or blood spots, now that we have Nick Ashton with us at the Arizona ADRC in Banner. So how we're going to collect p-tau and other blood-based biomarkers on individuals. And this table down here at the bottom is outdated. It's when our age range in GMatch was slightly more restricted between the ages of 55 and 75, but we get the nice expected distribution of APOE genotypes in individuals. I just wanted to close with some research studies that we have been doing in collaboration with several others on this call, including Rachel Nasheni, on how to engage individuals in joining a research registry and then ultimately in Alzheimer's related studies. So this is an R01 with myself and Amy Blakely that's using the reason action approach as a theoretical framework for identifying the beliefs, the relevant beliefs and determinants of joining a registry. And our goal was really to develop evidence-based messages for joining a registry. Again, oftentimes we think we know what people want to hear, or we think that's a message, but we really wanted to go through a methodical approach of testing this and putting things out in the field. So we did an elicitation study with a very diverse group of individuals to understand those determinants and beliefs. We did a very large national survey and then a series of focus groups to develop evidence-based messages addressing those beliefs that came up during the elicitation study and national survey. And we developed, here's just snapshots of these messages and imagery that are very different looking from what we were running in the past with our standard messages. And I didn't show the standard messages right now, but these are in the field right now on Facebook and other areas. And we're already anecdotally seeing a much greater increase in the number of Hispanic and Black African Americans who are joining compared to our standard messages. And so we're going to be running some head-to-head comparisons later this summer, but these we'll be providing as a resource to anybody who wants to use any parts of our messaging. You're welcome to reach out once we're done with the research study, and happy to share everything with you about these. And then just some thank yous. There's a very small but mighty team at Banner who are leading the registry and GMatch. And none of this could be done without them. And of course, our Step Up collaborators, including Rachel. So thank you for that. And I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Jessica. That was also fascinating, particularly your messaging testing. You've been really successful in bringing in so many people. I'm going to turn this over to Emily now, who's going to be managing the questions and answers. We have about 125 people here, so I imagine we're going to have a lively discussion. So over to you, Emily.
Great. Thank you all so much for the presentations. There was so much information packed in there. I actually just wanted to start with a question about what your experience was with the IRB and the approval process for getting your registry started. If you could say something about what that looks like. You've described very different things that you're collecting, sometimes just more demographic information all the way through samples and cognitive testing. So if in addition to the IRB piece, you could just say something too about the consent process, that would be great. Josh, do you want to start?
Sure. So ours is a minimal risk protocol for the IRB. It is IRB approved. I put some things in the Q&A, but we did begin with having people do a digital signature with a stylus or their finger. A majority of people for us have enrolled on some sort of handheld device, mostly tablets, but a lot of phones. And relatively early in the process, we kind of decided to move away from that signature requirement because it was leading to challenges for a lot of folks who were trying to enroll and move toward a checkbox approach. It is low risk, and for us, we collect medical information and some, modestly sensitive information, but the risks are quite low. Loss of confidentiality and being contacted by a study that is not of interest to you are the ones we highlight. So we've had a pretty straightforward go of it with the IRB. One thing we should have done better was in designing the registry and thinking about renewal, we made it clear that people would not be removed from the registry until they had failed to renew 3 years in a row. But we didn't adequately give ourselves chances to go back to people and invite them to renew at later dates, which is something we had to kind of deal with post hoc, and folks might think about if they're building a new registry.
Rachel?
I guess a similar story to Josh. So it was a minimal risk study approved by UCSF IRB. So everyone who enrolls signs a consent document online. There's a main consent, which brings you into the registry. There are also additional optional consents. So for example, if for certain kind of sub-studies within the brain health registry, you might be asked to sign a data sharing consent so that we can link data with another study. All the study partners consent online as well. And again, agree with Josh. So the main risks are loss of privacy. Of course, we do everything we can to protect privacy, and just possible frustration with, taking a cognitive test that's frustrating, that sort of thing. One thing, I kind of hinted at was the amount of support needed for our participants. So of course, because everyone is consented into our research study, we need to answer everyone who comes to us with questions. These can be really benign, like, the microphone doesn't work on my computer, to I answer that questionnaire and it's making me feel really bad and I'm having some sort of adverse psychological event. And so we have a really detailed system for staff members to provide support, and some of it's automated, but for flagging certain communications as being escalated all the way up to, the lead investigators, if necessary. And I guess also I'll just say, so we tried just having this one IRB protocol and then just building and building and building the BHRs as we added functionalities, and eventually the UCSF IRB was like, enough, now you need separate protocols. So that's where the direction we've gone in.
So ours is similar. We actually don't even have to have a consent for the registry. Our members do accept the website terms and conditions that do get reviewed and updated by Banner Legal from time to time with information. So they accept the terms and conditions. And then when this is just for the registry, I'll get to GMatch in a little bit, which is a whole different beast. The registry, we have a section on Find a Study where they can review a study opportunity, and if they're interested, they can have their contact information shared with the enrolling study. And in that point, they enter in, again, their own information, and they check a box that say they agree that they reviewed the information and they are taking action to share their information with the enrolling study. And that's just for the registry. Because it was viewed as minimal risk. Again, it's basically a mailing list, and we are connecting them. We're sharing them study opportunities for which they might be interested. For GMatch, that is an IRB approved study. We have an electronic informed consent document. It is an IRB approved protocol, and they review it, and then they check a box that says they agree, and that sort of creates a digital signature, and it's timestamp dated, attached to their profile. Something that Josh mentioned, which isn't necessarily IRB related, but we do have it's an internet-based registry, and we have a lot of unclean data. And so we have to go through a process of deduping, right? And saying, okay, this email address has been used several times. And so trying to have that data cleanliness is really important. And then because so much of what we do is by email, we do move people to a deactivated list so that it keeps there's something about email hygiene and your email deliverability through your system. So if you're sending to a lot of bad email addresses and you get bounce backs, it actually hurts your deliverability for all users. So we have to go through a process of that. For GMatch, we don't actually ever remove somebody from the list, but we do move them to a deactivated, again, because they're in a consented study. We will never remove them, but we won't necessarily be engaging with them if they say, look, I no longer want to participate, or they stop replying to our emails.
Great, thank you all. We have a question about underrepresentation, particularly of men. And so there was a question about whether you could suggest ideas to increase male enrollment, particularly from already underrepresented groups. Jessica, can I kick that one to you to start?
Sure. So that was actually part of Step Up originally. We thought, okay, men and certain racial ethnic groups that we were focusing on, Hispanic, Latinos, and Black African Americans and men were the groups. And it was interesting that really the messaging that we were developing wasn't really any different for the men versus the other groups. So time will tell. But some of this I also think is a problem of where we're advertising. I'll be completely candid that men are interested, men want to join, but as we go to newspaper advertisements or online forums or Facebook or things like that, they might not be as active. So I will hopefully in a few more months have some good Step Up data to show that not only were our new messages effective at increasing representation of Hispanic Latinos and Black African Americans, but also men. Stay tuned. But that's part of our papers that we've been working on is men. So.
And just building off of that, you mentioned Facebook, and we had a question about whether you had tried any other platforms for communicating with participants. So WhatsApp, the different places you might be talking to participants or advertising.
I can start. We've used Facebook. We've used local paper, community newspapers. It's a little bit harder. Well, now that we have QR codes and people are a little bit more familiar with QR codes, I think that's an easier way. When we would do a newspaper advertisement and they had to go online to join and then type in the URL, that was a bit cumbersome versus being able to click online. We've done like what you call banner advertisements, Google ads. Again, Facebook tended to be the most bang for the most cost effective, but it has a lot of downsides. We've done Instagram, other things, but again, with our trying to target the 50+ user, Facebook continues to do well, but it is problems. We've not used WhatsApp or anything to communicate with people once they're in our registry. I think that would create a lot of data security concerns from our institution. Everything that we do has to be, HIPAA compliant and whatnot. So we do everything through our systems here where we can track and show things. But we will have a HIPAA compliant text messaging capability soon through our registry.
I agree with everything Jessica said. Facebook, for the demographic we're trying to reach in terms of age, seems to be the main one that's used, like the main digital advertising source, social media source. We have tried a few others. That may shift in the next 10 or 20 years, obviously, if Facebook's still around then. We have, as I mentioned, some initiatives to reach younger family members of older adults and have them as the first point of contact. And there we've started using other channels like TikTok and things like that. Jessica mentioned some of the disadvantages of using Facebook. Jessica and I have had conversations about this. The rules in Facebook are really dynamic about how the advertisements work and all of their secret sauce optimization that goes on behind the scenes. And it may actually, in some cases, amplify the underrepresentation, because basically if people like the ad, then they'll show it to more people, quote, like that, whatever that means. And so you can kind of amplify underrepresentation that way. And also we have found and compared notes with other studies advertising on Facebook. I don't know if others have found this, Jessica, Josh, it's starting to become saturated with a lot of asks related to health and related to Alzheimer's disease. And we've seen less and less effectiveness over the last few years of Facebook advertising for that reason. So that's an issue as well. Just many clinical trials and clinical studies and registries all asking for people to do something via Facebook.
Josh, you're on mute.
Sorry. We'll have data next year for the experiment I mentioned, where we're comparing Facebook ads, mailed postcards, and traditional grassroots go to the community and talk about who we are and what we do. It's an interrupted time series design experiment that is stratified by ADI. So we're making sure we're hitting each of 5 quintiles of neighborhood diversity evenly, but we're also doing it in multiple languages. And so I'm really excited to finish the first of those experiments because, you know, one can easily imagine where certain things work best overall, but other things work best for specific groups or populations. And we're kind of beginning the next one of those where I'd love to test some other modalities, because I completely agree. Facebook is an evolution unto itself, and adhering to their rules and policies has been a real challenge through the course of an experiment where you don't like to have things change once you get started. So I think that exploring other social media outlets and mechanisms to reach people where they're comfortable getting information will just be something that we have to strive to adapt and update over time.
And I'll just chime in and say also there's a lot of institutions, a growing number of institutions that are very hesitant to even allow you to put Facebook pixels on your website or any other tracking because of Facebook's, there's been some litigation against organizations. So this is just a very quickly evolving area. So more to come.
Great, thank you all. We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm hoping we can get to 2 questions. So the first of these, are any of you returning health or cognitive information to registry participants or sharing that information with participants?
We are not in the setting of the registry. We don't test people. We ask about subjective complaints and use a validated instrument for that. But we don't give information back to people in the setting of the registry.
And we don't currently, but we plan to. We hear this again and again in many different settings from community boards and others. And of course, we all know in the AD clinical research field, this has changed a lot over the last few years, right? For in-clinic studies as well. We did do a pilot study where we returned results, like a summary of one cognitive test, like the performance on one cognitive test. And it worked well, and we didn't see adverse events around that. So this is something we'd really like to do in the future. I think it will help, and I think we should do it if people want results, and if we can provide things that are meaningful, actionable, and we can support people in receiving the results.
Our registry does not collect we don't do any cognitive testing, although we've talked about doing, add-on studies where at least people can see kind of like at least where they fit in demographically or whatnot. GMatch intentionally does not return its results so that we didn't become a free 23andMe, but other studies have returned those APOE results just fine.
Great. And then the last question is, what strategies have you tried to avoid registrant burnout? So over inundating them with study invitations, and also how do you track to make sure people aren't perhaps enrolling in multiple studies?
Yeah, we track those things carefully. I've actually been really reluctant to send too many messages to our registrants on an annual basis, even for things like our retention efforts with newsletters. So we're very intentional about how many communications. If someone enrolls in a longitudinal study like a clinical trial, they get deactivated so they can't be referred to an additional study. If they're referred to something like a one-time survey or cross-sectional study, they remain active. And there too, we're pretty carefully tracking those things. I don't think we know yet the best answer. Some people say that you have to approach someone many, many times before you actually get through to them and get them to say yes to something. We've taken a more cautious, conservative approach with limiting communications and contact. We also work really closely with the investigative teams who are doing the recruiting to make sure they're utilizing the registry as we've outlined they're required to do, and that we're getting the data back from them to instruct the performance of the registry.
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance between engagement and burden or bothering people. And I agree that, we try to strike that balance, but I'm not sure we do it perfectly. We'll do like an email campaign for someone for a specific study, which consists of a few emails, and then we stop after that. So I agree with everything Josh said around this.
Yeah, we'll only send so many emails about a particular study. They can opt out and say, please don't contact me about this particular study. GMatch has a little bit more functionality where they can say, not now, remind me later. We can do a mailed letter campaign. But again, we have like a max 3 emails spaced over time. We use an editorial calendar so that the same types of studies aren't being promoted, to the same groups of people. We have do email segregation lists. Then we do have a dashboard that for our researchers to log in to track their referrals. And we actually make sure we hold our researchers accountable. So when they do receive a match, that we need them to strike while the iron's hot. If our member sits on their dashboard for too long, they've lost interest, and we will then deactivate the researcher's account and say you'll no longer receive new referrals from us until you clean up. So it's a balance. Lots of lessons learned here.
Great. Thank you all so much. We're at 1 o'clock, so I'm sure people have other Zoom meetings to log on to, but thank you. And the recording will be on the NACC website, so people can come back to the slides and the resources and all of the insight. And I hope everyone has a good afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.